Alright, so in my previous video that I made on refuting the four most common atheistic arguments, I had gotten some responses to that video, and some of them were legitimate, most were not. And if they were legitimate, I had already made the counterpoints to them in the video itself, so, good job not paying attention there, son. But with that being said, one of the complaints that was registered was that positive atheism is too easy a viewpoint to refute. And I agree with them, actually. It's very easy to refute that viewpoint. And however, it's the only strong atheism or positivistic atheism is the only atheistic viewpoint that is actually an argument, that actually you can test and prove. It's the only scientific hypothesis that atheism as a belief system can generate, because soft atheism or agnosticism is not a viewpoint. It's just an admission of ignorance, and you actually can't prove or disprove that, because from the person's perspective, the soft atheistic claim is entirely valid. It's like, I've never seen God, therefore I don't have any reason to believe. And to that I would say, I agree with you. Look if you want, seek and ye shall find, and you'll probably find, as so many other people have. But if you don't want to seek, I'm not going to force you to. I don't care. So with that being said, yes, strong atheism is a simple point to refute. It's entirely indefensible. It's irrational and emotional, and I agree. It's easy to refute it. So I'm going to do something a little more tricky. And since people thought I was taking the easy way out and not trying to refute agnosticism, which isn't even a position, I'm going to make an argument, a definitive argument, for theism to the best of my ability. So the theistic claim, positive theistic claim, is that God equals real. It's an algebraic, logical expression. Of course, when you're saying that like x equals y, you need a definition of both x and y, and that's a problem, because if somebody is atheistic, they will likely define God as a primitive superstition, or as somebody I know who's a computer scientist told me recently, I don't believe in a fake sky daddy. To which I replied, I don't believe in a fake sky daddy either, because who would believe in something that's fake? He didn't quite get what I was saying, is that if you define something a priori as fake and then you realize it's fake, don't be too shocked. You defined it a priori as a superstition. I wanted to avoid that. So I decided to use the Webster's Dictionary definition of God, and that led me to this definition of God: a superhuman spirit with power over human fortune or nature. Okay, well, everything in that definition is pretty self-evident, except for the word spirit. So I found the Webster Dictionary definition of spirit, and the definition of spirit is the qualities regarded as forming the definitive or typical elements in the character of a person, nation, or group in the thought and attitudes of a particular period. So basically it could be said as the spirit of civilization, the spirit of rationalism, of a philosophy. It's basically the composing elements of a system, and the qualities that emerge from people collectively following the rules of that system. So, and the definition of real, I'm going to not define real as material or observable or repeatable. I'm going to define real as existing, because God, if God is real, it is not material. If God is real, it is not. The religious experience is probably not repeatable, since we cannot compel God to act if God is real. So, I just want to keep things fair, because obviously if I define real as material, then yeah, by that definition, a spirit or the qualities of a society are not real, because they're not material. So, that would be kind of cheap. So, real exists in an objective or subjective sense. Now, people might not like that. but it's the only fair definition that I can come up with. So the real equation is, do superhuman qualities regarded as forming the elements of a group, nature, or the attitudes of a particular period exist? And the answer to that is yes, if you define God as that. Now, that could be seen as fairly simplistic, and I'm sure somebody will write in saying, well, God is just a collection of superstitions, or there's no evidence that that's real. And I'm sure some Christians would take, or other religious people would take issue with that statement as well, because they like to think of their God as a scientific reality, and the qualities of forming the sum total of the qualities of a society is not necessarily a materialistic or scientific category. I think a lot of religious people think they have to play by the rules of science and materialism implicitly, but science and materialism is very bad at defining sociological and psychological concepts. It's kind of like using science to determine the sum total of human behavior over thousands of years. It's a lot like trying to chop down a tree with a wrench. Perhaps it could be done, but it's definitely not the best tool for the job. What the best tool for the job is, I'm not sure, but I don't think it is science and materialism as it's currently used, because it's based on ideas like induction and empiricism and things that they require repeatable experiences in order to verify. And whatever the superhuman qualities regarded as forming the elements of a group, nature, or the attitudes of a particular period are, they're not repeatable because they're historical. They're subject to things like the butterfly effect that make repeatable, testable, and statistical and observable methods of research sort of a bad tool for the job. So, yeah. And I guess the final question is, would the spirit of a civilization exist independently of the civilization? And that's a tricky question, but I would say, because civilizations tend to compound on each other and one precedes the other and is actually, like ancient Egypt could be seen, for instance, as a very, very early form of European society or of American society, because they share, through the Greeks, a causal chain where the culture and foundational elements of the culture get passed along. And I think that's why we see things like, the idea of Saturn turning into the idea of Satan from the idea of Set. So when the Christians started taking over pagan societies, they incorporated a lot of their deities and took them in as angels. And those deities, again, could be seen as the qualities of a particular group or nature or a particular period. And, like the archetype of evil in Egyptian mythology was Set. And in the Roman mythology was Saturn. And in the Christian mythology was Satan. You can see the evolution of the ideas just through the name itself. And Saturn's color was black, and the bad guy in Hollywood movies still always wears black. It's very apparent to tell that Darth Vader is just the same reflection of that unbroken chain of evil archetypes. So yeah, that's my answer to the question, is God real? Obviously, it depends how you define God, and depends how you define real. But if you define existence as reality, and if you define God as the qualities, the personified qualities of a society, then yes, that's very real. And given that those are the Webster definition dictionary entries, you can take that for what it's worth. I wanted to use our society's definition of terms as a collective, and the dictionary is a pretty good approximation of that. Because obviously, if I was being dishonest, I could define God as a collection of superstitions, or I could define God as something which is obviously apparent. And I didn't want to be unfair to the question, because I think it's actually a pretty serious question, and one that requires honesty in order to ethically and accurately examine. So yeah, that was my video on that.